Hello, I'm Dr. James Bogash, Master of Health and Longevity and creator of Modern Health Myths. And today we're going to talk about the Danish Mask Study, which you may or may not have heard about, but it certainly helps us look at the mask issue from a different standpoint. Most of the studies that have been done have all been theoretical or looking at large groups. They haven't been what's considered the gold standard as a randomized trial because we just haven't had time. There's been a lot of discussion on the whole mask issue about whether they help or whether they don't. I've certainly given my opinion on the research that's been out there. And interestingly enough, the researchers in this particular study in the discussion section, which everybody should read, talks about the Lancet study that everybody refers to, where there are only 3 actual studies that looked at mass transmission in the community in somebody who was infected in the household. So the data isn't what people think that it is, and we need to open our minds to look at everything that comes out. So certainly this Danish Mask Study flies in the face of what most people believe, but is actually relatively consistent with what the actual research suggests. So this one was actually pretty well done. They controlled for a lot of different variables, but basically from April 3rd to June 2nd. So this is a time in where the Danish were not required to wear masks, and so mask compliance was less than 5%. And they took a group of a little over 6,000, so 6,024 people, and they balanced them. These were people who, A, did not have a positive COVID antibody test or a PCR test, so it was highly likely they hadn't been infected and weren't infected at the beginning of the study. And they were not using masks, and they had to spend at least 3 hours outside of the home. So these weren't people that were sheltering in place and not exposing themselves. These were people that were out in the community and potentially being exposed to what was going on. At the end of the study, I'll kind of get into some of the concerns and what the study really says, but what it really doesn't. But so they gave half of the group the masks, half of the group no masks to use. These were 3-ply surgical masks. They had 50 disposable masks to use during the study period. They were followed for a month. And the people in the control group, the mask group, the no mask group, were pretty well balanced as far as age and pre-existing conditions, things like that. So again, a lot of the I's were dotted and T's were crossed in this particular study. They were randomized, which is what you want to do. You don't want to create a study where you put all the healthy people with or without masks and all the unhealthy people with or without masks. So you want to balance out the group, and they did this pretty well. What was interesting is they also asked about mask adherence to the people, or like how well were they using the masks in the people in the mask group. And they found that 46% of the people used the masks as recommended. Another 47% used the masks predominantly as recommended. And then another 7% didn't follow the mask recommendation. So why sign up for the study? What's interesting about this is that some people may say, well, we don't know that people actually used the masks the way they were supposed to. But that's the reality. This study, from a public health standpoint, was looking how society would use masks. We've certainly all seen the mask below the face, low-quality cotton mask, bandana, things like that. But that's reality. That's society. And so if we look at masking up, we have to take all of those factors into account. So it was very interesting that the researchers actually asked that question to look at who was using it as recommended and not recommended. So the other thing to consider is that this was a time when there wasn't a lot of community presence of coronavirus. Everything was still open, public transportation. About halfway through the study, they opened the cafes and the restaurants, but they were checking the spread of coronavirus in a community that at the time didn't have a lot of spread. So that's other people who are discounting this study will point that out. So keep that in mind. But they found that in the mask wearers, the 42 of them, or 1.8%, ended up testing positive, either PCR or antibody testing. In the no mask group, that was 2.1%, or 53 people. Not much of a difference between those groups, especially given the size of the study. And so essentially no difference in the people that wore masks and didn't wear masks. Researchers even tore into the data, and they looked at the people that were they took out the people that didn't wear the mask as intended, and the data stayed the same. They looked at the group that wore it as recommended, no difference, and the group that predominantly followed it, and again, no difference. So not only was the study well designed, the way they tore through the research was very well done. So what does this really say? Because as of right now, this study found that in a low incidence area like the Danish population at the time, where coronavirus was not running rampant, that mask wearing didn't make a difference in protecting you. Now, that's not what we've pushed in this whole scenario. We've pushed wearing a mask to protect others. This study didn't look at that at all. It can't evaluate that. However, later today or tomorrow, I will be posting a video on a 10 million person study in Wuhan that, again, may surprise or frustrate some of you. If you think that you know the research on asymptomatic transmission, I think you're going to be a little bit surprised when we go over that. As always, I'll post a link to this particular study in the comment section. Make sure you share this video with somebody who you think needs the information, and subscribe to the channel.